Body fluids and circulation. You have learned that all living cells have to be provided with nutrients, O2, and other essential substances. Also, the waste or harmful substances produced have to be removed continuously for healthy functioning of tissues. It is therefore essential to have efficient mechanism for the movement of these substances to the cells and from the cells. Different groups of animals have evolved different methods for this transport. Simple organisms like sponges and coelentrates circulate water from their surroundings through their body cavities to facilitate the cells to exchange these substances. More complex organisms use special fluids within their bodies to transport much materials. Blood is the most commonly used body fluid by most of the higher organisms, including humans, for this purpose. Another body fluid, lymph, also helps in the transport of certain substances. In this chapter, you will learn about the composition and properties of blood and lymph tissue fluid, and the mechanism of circulation of blood is also explained herein. Blood. Blood is a special connective tissue consisting of fluid matrix, plasma, and formed elements. Plasma. Plasma is a straw-colored viscous fluid constituting nearly 55% of the blood. 90 to 92% of the plasma is water, and protein contributes 6 to 8% of it. Fibrinogen, globulins, and albumin are the major proteins. Fibrinogen are needed for clotting or coagulation of blood. Globulin primarily are involved in the defense mechanism of the body, and the albumins help in osmotic balance. Plasma also contains small amount of minerals like Na+, Ca2+, Mg2+, HCO3-, Cl-, etc. Glucose, amino acid, lipids, etc. are also present in the plasma as they are always in transit in the body. Factors for coagulation or clotting of blood are also present in the plasma in an inactive form. Plasma without the clotting factor is called serum. Formed elements. Erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets are collectively called formed elements, and they constitute nearly 45% of the blood. Erythrocytes or RBCs, red blood cells, are the most abundant of all the cells in the blood. A healthy adult man has on an average 5 million to 5.5 million of RBCs per millimeter cube of the blood. RBCs are formed in the red bone marrow in the adults. RBCs are devoid of nucleus in most of the mammals and are biconcave in shape. They have a red-colored iron-containing complex protein called hemoglobin. Hence, the color and the name of these cells. A healthy individual has 12 to 16 grams of hemoglobin in every 100 ml of blood. These molecules play a significant role in transport of respiratory gases. RBCs have an average lifespan of 120 days, after which they are destroyed in the spleen graveyard of RBCs. Leukocytes are also known as white blood cells as they are colorless due to the lack of hemoglobin. They are nucleated and are relatively lesser in number, which averages around 6,000 to 8,000 per millimeter cube of the blood. Leukocytes are generally short-lived. We have two main categories of WBCs, granulocyte and agranulocyte. Neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils are different types of granulocyte, while lymphocyte and monocyte are the agranulocyte. Neutrophil are the most abundant cells, 60 to 65% of the total WBCs, and basophil are the least, 0.5 to 1% among them. Neutrophil and monocyte की percentage 6 to 8% are phagocytic cells which destroy foreign organisms entering the body. Basophil secrete histamine, serotonin, heparin, etc. and are involved in inflammatory responses or reactions. Eosinophils 2 to 3% resist infections and are also associated with allergic reactions. Lymphocytes 20 to 25% are of two major types, B and T forms. Both B and T lymphocytes are responsible for immune responses of the body. Platelets, also called thrombocytes, are cell fragments produced from megakaryocytes, special cells in the bone marrow. Blood normally contains 1.5 lakh to 3.5 lakh platelets per millimeter cube. Platelets can release a variety of substances, most of which are involved in the coagulation or clotting of blood. A reduction in their number can lead to clotting disorders, which will lead to excessive loss of blood from the body. Blood groups. As you know, blood of human beings differ in certain aspects, though it appear to be similar. Various types of grouping of blood has been done. Two such groupings, the ABO and RH, are widely used all over the world. ABO grouping. ABO grouping is based on the presence or absence of two surface antigens, chemicals that can induce immune responses on the RBCs, namely A and B. Similarly, the plasma of different individuals contain two natural antibodies, proteins produced in the response to the antigens. The distribution of the antigen and antibodies in the four blood groups A, B, AB and O are given in table 18.1. You probably know that during blood transfusion, any blood cannot be used. The blood of the donor has to be carefully matched with the blood of the recipient before any blood transfusion to avoid severe problems of clumping, destruction of RBC. The donor's compatibility is also shown in table 18.1. Blood group A, antigen on the RBC A, antibody in plasma antibody B, donors group A and O. Blood group B, antigen on RBC B, antibodies in plasma antibody A and donor group are B and O. Blood group AB, antigens on RBC A and B, antibodies in plasma nil, donors group AB, A, B and O. Blood group O, antigen on RBCs nil, antibodies in plasma antibody A and antibody B both, and donors group O. From the above mentioned table, it is evident that group O blood group can be donated to person with any other blood group, and hence O group individuals are called universal donors. Person with AB group can accept blood from person with AB as well as other groups of blood. Therefore, such persons are called universal recipients. RH grouping. Another antigen, the RH antigen, similar to one present in rhesus monkeys, hence RH is also observed on the surface of the RBC of majority, nearly 80% of the humans. Such individuals are called RH positive, and those in whom this antigen is absent are called as RH negative. An RH negative person exposed to RH positive blood will form specific antibodies against the RH antigens. Therefore, RH group should also be matched before transfusion. A special case of RH incompatibility mismatching has been observed between the RH negative blood of the pregnant mother with RH positive blood of the fetus. RH antigens of the fetus do not get exposed to the RH negative blood of the mother in the first pregnancy, as the two bloods are well separated by the placenta. However, during the delivery of the first child, there is a possibility of exposure of the maternal blood to small amount of RH positive blood from the fetus. In such cases, the mother starts preparing antibodies against RH antigens in her blood. In case of her subsequent pregnancies, the RH antibodies from the mother, RH negative, can leak into the blood of the fetus, RH positive, and destroy the fetal RBCs. This could be fatal to the fetus or could cause severe anemia and jaundice to the baby. This condition is called erythroblastosis fetalis. This can be avoided by administering anti-RH bodies to the mother immediately after the delivery of the first child. ये important है. Coagulation of blood. You know that when you cut your finger or hurt yourself, your wound does not continue to bleed for a long time. Usually the blood stops flowing after some time. Do you know why? Blood exhibits coagulation or clotting in response to an injury or trauma. This is a mechanism to prevent excessive loss of blood from body. You would have observed a dark reddish brown scum formed at the site of cut or an injury over a period of time. It is a clot or coagulum formed mainly of a network of threads called fibrin, in which dead and damaged formed elements of blood are trapped. Fibrins are formed by the conversion of inactive fibrinogen in the plasma by the enzyme thrombins. Thrombins in turn are formed from another inactive substance present in the plasma called prothrombin. An enzyme complex thrombokinase is required for the above reaction. This complex is formed by a series of linked enzymic reactions cascade process involving a number of factors present in the plasma in an inactive state. An injury or a trauma stimulates the platelets in the blood to release a certain factors which activate the mechanism of coagulation. Certain factors released by the tissue at the site of the injury can also initiate coagulation. Calcium plays a very important role in clotting. Lymph or tissue fluid. As the blood passes through the capillaries in tissues, some water along with many small water-soluble substances move out into the spaces between the cell of tissues, leaving the larger protein and most of the formed elements in the blood cells. This fluid released out is called the interstitial fluid or tissue fluid. It has the same material distribution as that in the plasma. Exchange of nutrient, gases, etc. between the blood and the cell always occur through this fluid. An elaborate network of vessels called lymphatic system collect this fluid and drains it back to the major veins. The fluid present in the lymphatic system is called the lymph. Lymph is a colorless fluid containing specialized lymphocytes which are responsible for the immune responses of the body. Lymph is also an important carrier for nutrients, hormones, etc. Fats are absorbed through lymphs in the lacteals present in the intestinal villi. Circulatory pathways. The circulatory patterns are of two types, open or closed. Open circulatory system is present in arthropod and mollusk, in which blood pumped by the heart passes through large vessels into open spaces or body cavities called sinuses. Annelids and chordates have a closed circulatory system in which the blood pumped by the heart is always circulated through a closed network of blood vessels. This pattern is considered to be more dangerous, more advantageous, as the flow of liquid can be more precisely regulated. All vertebrates possess a muscular chambered heart. Fishes have a two-chambered heart with an atrium and a ventricle. Amphibians and the reptiles, except crocodiles, have a three-chambered heart with two atria and a single ventricle, whereas crocodiles, birds, mammals possess four-chambered heart with two atria and two ventricles. In fish, the heart pumps out deoxygenated blood, which is oxygenated by the gills and supplied to the body parts, from where deoxygenated blood is returned to the heart, single circulation. In amphibian reptile, the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the gills, lungs, skin, and the right atrium gets the deoxygenated blood from the other body part. However, they get mixed up in a single ventricle which pumps out mixed blood in complete double circulation. In birds and mammals, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood received by the left and right atria respectively passes on to the ventricles of the same side. The ventricle pump it out without any mixing up, that is, two separate circulatory pathways are present in these organisms. Hence, these animals have double circulation. Let us study the human circulatory system. Human circulatory system. Human circulatory system, also called the blood vascular system, consists of a muscular chambered heart, a network of close branching blood vessels, and blood, the fluid which is circulated. Heart, the mesodermally derived organ, is situated in the thoracic cavity in between the two lungs, slightly tilted to the left. It has the size of a clenched fist. It is protected by a double-walled membranous bag pericardium enclosing the pericardial fluid. Our heart has four chambers, two relatively small upper chambers called atria and two larger lower chambers called ventricles. A thin muscular wall called the interatrial septum separates the right and the left atria, whereas a thick wall, the interventricular septum, separates the left and the right ventricles. The atrium and the ventricles of the same side are also separated by a thick fibrous tissue called the atrioventricular septum. However, each of these septa are provided with an opening through which the two chambers of the same side are connected. The opening between the right atrium and the right ventricle is guarded by a valve formed of three muscular flaps or cusps, the tricuspid valve, whereas a bicuspid valve or mitral valve guards the opening between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The opening of the right and left ventricle into the pulmonary artery and the aorta respectively are provided with the semilunar valves. The valves in the heart allow the flow of the blood only in one direction, that is from the atria to the ventricles and from the ventricles to the pulmonary artery or aorta. These valves prevent any backward flow. The entire heart is made up of cardiac muscles. The wall of the ventricles are much thicker than that of the atria. A specialized cardiac musculature called the nodal tissue is also distributed in the heart. A patch of this tissue is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium called the sinoatrial node. Another mass of this tissue is seen in the lower left corner of the right atrium close to the arterioventricular septum called the arterioventricular node (AVN). A bundle of nodal fibers, arterioventricular bundle (AV bundle), continues from the AVN which passes to the arterioventricular septa to emerge on the top of the interventricular septum and immediately divides into the right and left bundle. These branches give rise to minute fibers to the ventricular musculature of the respective sides and are called the Purkinje fibers. The nodal musculature has the ability to generate action potentials without any external stimuli, that is, it is auto-excitable. However, the number of action potential that could be generated in a minute vary at different parts of the nodal system. The SAN can generate the maximum number of action potential, that is 70 to 75 per minute, and is responsible for initiating and maintaining the rhythmic contractile activity of the heart. Therefore, it is called the pacemaker. Our heart normally beats 70 to 75 times in a minute, average 72 beats per minute. Cardiac cycle. How does the heart functions? Let us take a look. To begin with, all the four chambers of the heart are in relaxed state, that is, they are in joint diastole. As the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open, blood from the pulmonary veins and vena cava flows into the left and the right ventricle respectively through the left and right atria. The semilunar valves are closed at this stage. The SAN now generates an action potential which stimulates both the atria to undergo a simultaneous contraction, the atrial systole. This increases the flow of blood into the ventricles by about 30%. The action potential is conducted to the ventricular side by the AVN and AV bundle, from where the bundle of His transmits it through the entire ventricular musculature. This causes the ventricular muscles to contract, ventricular systole. The atria undergoes relaxation, diastole coinciding with the ventricular systole. Ventricular systole increases the ventricular pressure, causing the closure of tricuspid and bicuspid valves due to the attempted backflow of the blood into the atria. As the ventricular pressure further increases, the semilunar valve guarding the pulmonary artery right side and the aorta left side are forced open, allowing the blood in the ventricles to flow through these vessels into the circulatory pathways. The ventricles now relax, ventricular diastole, and the ventricular pressure falls, causing the closure of semilunar valve, which prevents the backflow of the blood into the ventricles. As the ventricular pressure declines further, the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are pushed open by the pressure in the atria exerted by the blood which was being emptied into them by the veins. The blood now once again moves freely to the ventricles. The ventricles and the atria are now again in a relaxed joint diastole state as earlier. Soon the SAN generates a new action potential and the event described above are repeated in the sequence and the process continues. This sequential event in the heart, which is cyclically repeated, is called the cardiac cycle and consists of systole and diastole of both the atria and ventricles. As mentioned earlier, the heart beats 72 times per minute, that is, that many cardiac cycles are performed per minute. From this, it could be deduced that the duration of the cardiac cycle is 0.8 seconds. During a cardiac cycle, each ventricle pumps out approximately 70 ml of blood, which is called the stroke volume. Stroke volume multiplied by heart rate, number of beats per minute, gives the cardiac output. Therefore, the cardiac output can be defined as the volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle per minute and averages 5000 ml or 5 liter in a healthy individual. The body has the ability to alter the stroke volume as well as the heart rate and thereby the cardiac output. For example, the cardiac output of an athlete will be much higher than that of an ordinary man. During each cardiac cycle, two prominent sounds are produced, which can be easily heard through stethoscope. The first heard sound, love, is associated with the closure of the tricuspid and bicuspid valve, whereas the second heard sound, dub, is associated with the closure of semilunar valve. These sounds are of clinical diagnostic significance. ECG. You are probably familiar with the scene of the typical hospital television shows. The patient is hooked up to the monitor monitoring machine that shows that the voltage traces on a screen and makes the sound pip 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 as the patient goes into the cardiac arrest. This type of machine, electrocardiograph, is used to obtain an electrocardiogram ECG. ECG is a graphical representation of the electrical activity of the heart during the cardiac cycle. To obtain a standard ECG as shown in the Figure 18.3, a patient is connected to a machine with 3 electrical leads, one to each wrist and to the left ankle, that continuously monitor the heart activity. For a more detailed evaluation of the heart function, multiple leads are attached to the chest region. Here we will talk only about the standard ECG. Each peak in the ECG is identified with a letter from P to T that corresponds to a specific electrical activity of the heart. The P wave represents the electrical excitation or depolarization of the atria, which leads to the contraction of both the atria. The QRX complex represents the repolarization of the ventricle, which initiates the ventricular contraction. The contraction starts shortly after the Q and marks the beginning of the systole. The T wave represents the return of the ventricle from excited to normal state repolarization. The end of the T wave marks the end of the systole. Obviously, by counting the number of QRS complex that occur in a given time period, one can determine the heartbeat rate of an individual. Since the ECGs obtained from different individuals have roughly the same shape for a given lead configuration, any deviation from this shape indicates a possible abnormality or disease, hence it is of great clinical significance. Double circulation. The blood flows strictly by a fixed route through blood vessels, the arteries and the veins. Basically, each artery and veins consist of three layers: an inner lining of squamous endothelium, the tunica intima, a middle layer of smooth muscles and elastic fibers, the tunica media, and an external layer of fibrous connective tissue with collagen fiber, the tunica externa. Tunica media is comparatively thin in the veins. As mentioned earlier, the blood pumped by the right ventricles enter the pulmonary artery, whereas the left ventricle pumps blood into the aorta. The deoxygenated blood pumped into the pulmonary artery is passed on to the lungs, from where the oxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary vein into the left atrium. This pathway constitutes the pulmonary circulation. The oxygenated blood entering the aorta is carried by a network of arteries, arterioles, capillaries to the tissues, from where the deoxygenated blood is collected by a system of venules, veins and vena cava and emptied into the right atrium. This is the systemic circulation. The systemic circulation provides nutrients, O2 and other essential substances to the tissues and takes CO2 and other harmful substances away for elimination. A unique vascular connection exists between the digestive tract and liver called hepatic portal system. Hepatic portal vein carries blood from intestine to the liver before it is delivered to the systemic circulation. A special coronary system of blood vessel is present in the body exclusively for the circulation of blood to and from the cardiac musculature. Regulation of cardiac activities. Normal activities of the heart are regulated intrinsically, that is auto-regulated by specialized muscles, nodal tissues, hence the heart is called myogenic. A special neural center in the medulla oblongata can moderate the cardiac function through autonomic nervous system. Neural signals through the sympathetic nerves can increase the rate of heartbeat, the strength of the ventricular contraction, and thereby the cardiac output. On the other hand, parasympathetic neural signals, another component of ANS, decrease the rate of heartbeat, speed of conduction of action potential, and thereby the cardiac output. Adrenal and medullary hormones can also increase the cardiac output. Disorders of circulatory system. High blood pressure, hypertension. Hypertension is the term for blood pressure that is higher than normal, 120/80. In this measurement, 120 mm Hg millimeters of mercury pressure is the systolic or pumping pressure, and 80 mm Hg is the diastolic or resting pressure. If repeated checks of blood pressure of an individual is 140/90, 140/90 or higher, it shows hypertension. High blood pressure leads to heart disease and also affect vital organs like brain and kidney. Coronary artery disease, CAD. Coronary artery disease, often referred to as atherosclerosis, affects the vessel that supply blood to the heart muscle. It is caused by the deposit of calcium, fat, cholesterol and fibrous tissues which make the lumen of arteries narrower. Angina. It is also called angina pectoris. A symptom of acute chest pain appears when no enough oxygen is reaching the heart muscle. Angina can occur in men and women of any age, but it is more common among the middle-aged and elderly. It occurs due to the condition that affect the blood flow. Heart failure. Heart failure means the state of heart when it is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the needs of the body. It's sometimes called congestive heart failure because congestion of the lungs is one of the main symptoms of this disease. Heart failure is not the same as cardiac arrest. In cardiac arrest, heart stops beating, or it is also not similar to the or same as heart attack. In heart attack, the heart muscle is suddenly damaged by inadequate blood supply.